Good afternoon for you. Well, no, it's evening for you.
It's evening here. It's 6 p.m., but
Oh my
good
gosh.
afternoon to you, Ken.
Y-
Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. As always, and I've been looking forward to um, this session for a long time just because I enjoy spending time with you, and we've spent some pretty interesting times together over the years, including hiking in the mountains in Nepal, which was an interesting concept to say the least. When I was expecting uh, uh, walking along winding mountain streams, and instead it was dirt roads with donkeys and buses careening past and all that good stuff. But I'm really in the years we've known each other, starting way back when you were CEO of Alternative Bank Switzerland, and then took over the reins of the Global Alliance, which I was really, really pleased with that occurrence. Um, the organization has just massively changed. And a little background for the listeners. Martin is a longtime friend. He's the executive director of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, which is an international NGO based in the Netherlands of values-based financial institutions, and we'll certainly get into some of that. Um, Martin has a very a varied and expansive background in banking, including being the CEO of Alternative Bank Switzerland. Um, Martin, if we could just kind of get into a little bit on the GABV. I first, oh, what year was it? It was 2012. Um,
Yeah.
um, Tamara invited me to the annual conference in Vancouver, and I don't remember how many members we had at that point. It wasn't many, but there was a breakout session, and we were sitting at a round table, and there were CEOs from around the world at the table, and they started going around their story, and I was the CEO and founder of First Green Bank at the time, and I remember thinking, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to be here. These people are doing such amazing things, and I've just got this little country bank in Florida. And stuff has changed so much since then. So if I could just volley to you and let you kind of describe some of the changes that we've seen in the organization.
Yeah. Well, I really remember that meeting very well because it was my first meeting as well. I had joined
Oh, I
Alternative
forgot
Bank
that.
Switzerland on the 1st of January, and then my team told me, Martin, you have to go off to Vancouver and meet these people. And I was like, what are they talking about? I'm not going to travel across half of the globe just to meet some bankers. And when I arrived in Vancouver, I was just I felt like, wow, these are the people I need to help me solve all the challenges and the problems I have at my bank because immediately I think everyone connected on the same values and had similar issues. When I would go into a bankers meeting in Switzerland, I wouldn't get that, but there immediately it clicked, and I think I really benefited. So I think what the GAB since then really has evolved. It's true. I mean, that was 2012, and I think at the time there were maybe about around 25 members, maybe 30 members, certainly not more than that. And we were just kind of navigating our way and thinking of how we can collaborate more closely. Maybe just for the listeners, the GABV was founded in 2009. So this was about 3 years into the founding of the GABV. So it was still really early days. At the time, the GABV didn't even have an executive director. They didn't have, they only had volunteers working for and helping and supporting some of the larger banks, which were kind of getting this organization off the ground. And I think we've come really a very long way. I mean, I'll talk about that a little bit during the conversation, but in the meantime, we are 72 member banks in 42 countries around the globe. And what always fascinates me personally still to this day is that we are represented all the way from Canada to Papua New Guinea and all the way from Bolivia to Japan. And just the sheer diversity of CEOs, but they're all united around the same values, business models that want to achieve the same thing. So it's just a really fascinating community.
It really, really is, and that's the way I felt being there at that first, and then every meeting since. It's the annual conference is something I look forward to all year long. It's just wonderful to be there around, like you said, around our people, um, and some of the amazing problems worldwide that are being accomplished. Um, One of the things I've discussed at some length with folks is being a member of the GABV and what does that mean? And how difficult is it to be a member? And I tell everyone it's very difficult. The GABV vets a potential member extremely deeply, which I appreciate a lot. The last thing any of us want is anybody to accuse us of value washing or greenwashing or whatever. Um, what does it mean to be a values-based financial institution? Um, and then another term is the real economy
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. So look, I think maybe also for the benefit of our members, we have of course criteria of our listeners. We have criteria, and I'll go into those in a moment. But I think what it means to be a values-based bank is that you are driving a business model or you're in banking really to serve people and planet. I think that's kind of the bottom line. You are there to make a difference, to have an impact, a positive impact on society, on the environment. You want to protect the climate. You're not in it primarily for the money. Yes, of course, our members, they're profitable and profit is a hygiene factor, but that's not the driving force. I think that's really what it comes down to. It's finance for people and planet. Now, when we are a global organization, so values-based banking is also very contextual. It can mean something very different if you are operating, let's say, in Bangladesh, where maybe poverty reduction and income generation is the first motive of a values-based bank. Whereas maybe in the US, it might be, maybe in certain places in the United States, it might be financial inclusion, and in other places, it might be helping people buy their first homes. And then maybe again in other places in Europe, it might be more about the environmental sustainability or about dealing with social issues like migration, for example. So what we're looking for are really how do these banks respond to those societal or environmental challenges in their market? How do they think about them? And how do they adapt to them, to those challenges? So I think that's in essence what a values-based bank is trying to do. It's trying to use the banking model, the business model of the bank for achieving a positive impact. And now maybe going into a bit more detail, you were asking, well, how do you become a GABB member? What does it take to become a GABB member? We do have tools, but before I maybe talk about that, let me just also speak about what is the common denominator that brings our member banks together. So even though our member banks are very diverse, they are in the global south and in the global north, they might be credit unions, microfinance banks, retail banks, commercial banks. What really brings them together are what we call the GABV principles. It's first and foremost a business model that is defined around creating positive social and environmental impact. Secondly, it's a very strong focus on the real economy. And with real economy, we mean banks that are focused on brick and mortar projects. They finance entrepreneurs. consumers, homeowners. They're not the kind of banks that are primarily active in the capital markets. The third principle of the GABV is that our members are grounded in the communities they serve. They understand their clients better than other banks. They understand their business models and the risks associated with those business models better. And therefore, and that brings me to the fourth principle, they're also financially resilient when crisis hits or when there is an economic downturn. So that element of financial resilience is very important. Our members are not profit maximizing, but they are very resilient when it comes to their financial stability. And the fifth principle is about having a very inclusive and transparent governance. Our members try clients to all the other kind of stakeholders, the co-workers, for example. And finally, and this is maybe the most important principle in the GABV, all of those principles are embedded in the culture and the organization of the bank. So when you walk into the door of a values-based bank, you'll get a very different feel. You'll probably have a very different interaction with the teller, with the lender, because these are all very committed people that are believe in the business model, the mission of the bank, and they want to make a difference. Now, um, measuring that is not so easy. So when we assess members, we look at different aspects. We have a scorecard, and with that scorecard, we look at the financial resilience and the portfolio. To what degree is it really serving the triple bottom line, people, planet, and prosperity, or the real economy? But we also look at soft factors, at the culture of the bank, at the governance, the ownership, the business strategy, the products and services, the HR policies, etc. Those give us an indication of where the bank stands on its journey towards values-based banking.
Well, it's that the scorecard project, of course, is a very old. Um, I guess it's not a project anymore, but it's constantly in refinement and revision. And back at First Green, we were really involved in the scorecard development, and it's a really good tool, and I think it could be an excellent tool if we could ever convince a bank or a banker to go into a values proposition, which was one of my dreams when I started the last bank and this bank, was to influence and educate, to try to, because I had a number of CEO friends say to me, "Oh, Kenny, I really respect what you're doing. That's fantastic. Well, why don't you do it then?" Well, my shareholders, well, my board, they've always got an excuse.
Yeah,
And to me, the scorecards are a really nice tool to say these are the elements, and
yeah,
this is how you do it, and it's all laid out. But that allows like a really good segue, because I was listening to your description of some of the other members and their initiatives, and I'm thinking, oh, we have such first world problems. And then when you sit at the table with the CEO of Brock Bank in Bangladesh, and they're pretty much single-handedly bringing an entire country out of abject poverty, and we're worried about the next 100 solar loans we're going to make. You know, it is very different, and it's a very different perspective that I wish everybody in America could experience. It's like that cliche, travel is the antidote to a closed mind. And it has really influenced me and my thinking over the years. Um, but that does allow a really nice segue into what is a values-based versus a non-values-based financial institution, and what is the differences. And one of the things that really, and I guess it goes back to what is a bank, and a lot of people don't really understand what a bank is. They know, of course, because they're dealing with them, but I tell people, just think of it as deposits are our raw materials, and we take those in and we turn them into the finished product, which is loans. And so you can visualize how impactful that can be,
yeah,
where if your deposits are going into a bank that's turning around and lending it back out into renewable energy, into social equity or financial inclusion, or even Brock Bank in Bangladesh. Um, all of the amazing things they're doing, including microfinance, the largest payment system in the country, and all that kind of stuff. Um, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and we are all about renewable energy, and here in America, um, trying to promote that, and we don't have as big a poverty problem as some third world countries, um, but and I don't want to diss the big banks because there's certainly a need for big banks and the stuff that they can do that we can't do. Um, but they are generally the source of finance for, call it, dirty energy. Um, and I just kind of wanted to talk about some of the stats on that. Um, the top four U.S. banks alone represent 20% of global fossil fuel financing. And there's a really cool organization called Topo Finance that a fellow named Paul Moynister put together
Yeah.
and did a lot of research, and he's determined that moving $5,000 from a non-values-based bank, let's just call them that, to a values-based financial institution, because it includes credit unions, and I'm not an anti-credit union guy like a lot of bankers are in America. Um, if you move just $5,000, it's the equivalent of going on a vegan diet for a year. I mean, it's huge.
That's,
If you move
yeah.
$100,000, it's equivalent to the to reducing the emissions of 90 cross-country flights. So it has huge impact. It has huge influence on what happens. And um, one of my dear friends, Vince Siciliano, who was the CEO of New Resource Bank in California, coined a phrase, um, at least you know where your money sleeps at night. And
Yeah.
that's the way I like to look at it. Um, could you talk a little bit to, because the GABV commissioned a study years ago comparing uh, um, values-based banks with the globally
Systemic
significant
financial institutions.
financial institutions. And from a safety and soundness perspective, we far exceeded, what they were doing and financially. And so for people to take shots at us and say, oh, well, they're just a bunch of bunny huggers. They don't make any profit, or they don't, which by the way, we do. We're in the top 10% of performance of all community banks in Florida. But could you speak to that a little bit, that study, and then the more recent
Yeah.
initiative that y'all are
Yeah.
undertaking on the weapons and arms?
So you've covered a lot of topics, Ken. Where to start? So maybe talking first about that question around profitability, or like I said, I prefer calling it financial resilience because that's what really matters. We want financially resilient banks. So it goes a bit back to the history of the GABV. While the 2008 financial crisis was not the trigger for the foundation of the GABV, it just happened actually while our founders were talking about the idea of creating such a movement. And so it did have a huge impact, and it served kind of as an accelerator. And this notion of financial resilience suddenly really came out to the fore and became a very important element. And it's also reflected in our core principles of the GABV. And we then decided to track over the years what is the financial resilience of values-based banks compared to the global international systemic financial institutions. And what we could indeed show is that when a crisis would hit, the global systemic financial institutions would actually clearly underperform. They would really be hugely challenged financially because they would be invested in the capital markets. They would be over leveraged, and so on. And they would also maybe have lent actually to people who they shouldn't have been lending to. They didn't necessarily know their clients as well, et cetera, et cetera. At least that's what happened in the 2008 financial crisis. And we've been tracking that over time, whereas our members, they barely felt the financial crisis. In fact, if anything, many of our members grew very rapidly shortly after the financial crisis because a lot of people moved their money because they started getting disenchanted with some of the practices of the large global banks and felt they need an alternative. And then they found it in the values-based banking movement. So,
We
um,
did. We
yeah,
grew
yeah,
explosively. So
exactly. I mean, we did at Alternative Bank Switzerland. It was, in fact, almost generating a challenge for us having so
mhm.
many people bring their money from a large bank to a very small bank, and but we grew very quickly. So I think what I like to usually say is that values-based banks are not profitable despite being values-based, but because they are values-based. So what I want to say by that is that the values-based business model really is creating the elements and putting the elements in place that will create greater customer loyalty, greater stability, more prudent risk management policies, etc. And also the business model focused on the real economy typically is much less speculative and prone to the kind of cycles we see happening to the larger banks. Clearly, when you look at the boom times, when the economy is, exuberant, then it's likely that the large banks will be making much more profit than maybe a values-based bank. But that has to do also with that structure. So it's much more boom and bust with the large banks, whereas in the case of the values-based banks, it's just a continuous growth and a long-term stability that is really the focus of our strategies and of the leadership in our member banks.
W- Um, we have experienced a really unique experience with the GABV with our member bank and um, the Israeli conflict, and that has been very poignant to me when we have the opportunity to talk to their leadership and the bizarre to us things they are having to go through just to
Yeah.
serve their community and all that stuff. How impactful is banking in that topic of, finance for war, finance for peace?
Yeah. So I could say here we have members really in almost every corner of the world, you could say, and one of our leaders is also Bank of Palestine, which is really a bank which is just doing their job, trying to help people. They're not in that sense political as very often when you talk about Palestine and Israel, you get into a political discussion. But I think what is really great about them, they just see themselves as enablers to entrepreneurs. They're open. They're really doing a great job, and they've been continuing operations, helping people actually protect their savings in Gaza during the war because they wouldn't know where to bring their money, and so that was one of the few safe places to bring their money. And I think that's a very good example of resilience. And we have other banks that are operating in very challenging corners of the world. I think these experiences, these very, sometimes also quite, you hear tragic stories as well when you talk to these banks from around the world, what they're going through, what their staff is going through, their co-workers are going through, and still they keep working on. This has really we felt we needed to make a statement and kind of address this issue of what is actually the role of finance and the financial industry in conflict and in maybe also do we have a role to play in preventing war and fostering peace? And so together with our longtime member Banca Etica in Italy, who were our host for the annual meeting in 2024, we commissioned a study where we analyzed what the role is of the financial industry in the defense industry and what role it plays. And what we could see is really that between 2020 and 2022, the financial institutions, including the major banks, the large insurance companies, investment funds, sovereign wealth funds, even pension funds and public institutions, they supported the defense industries in those 3 years with at least $1 trillion in finance. So there's a huge impact. And while we do not deny any country the right to defend itself, what our concern is that when you leave the defense industry to the free market, that you have outcomes which are actually not what you want to achieve, which is peace. You have a proliferation of arms. Suddenly it becomes a product like any other, and it creates all kind of risks to society. And so what we feel is the right policy is that defense should really be in the realm of governments. The governments should be funding this. They should be driving this. Whereas the banks, the financial industry should really exclude any type of funding because we don't believe that financing weapons and the trade and production of weapons is compatible with any definition of sustainable development. It prevents us from really addressing the real issues in the world, which are, climate change, ensuring that people have a livelihood, financial inclusion. These are the things banks should be concerned about, and not the finance of weapons and war.
Well, I I couldn't agree more. And again, listening to the stories that are coming out of the conflicts from our bank members, it's just really heart-wrenching um and amazing that well that they're keeping the wheels on, you know, that they're able to even function. Um, the for us, a big part of our um, our story and our desire is the education and influence piece, and we have found the GABV to be a great partner, if you will, in that space. And we send directors every year to the Governance Academy, and then we try to send some of our folks to the Leadership Academy every year. Um, what what do you view, or what does the GABV view as the importance of that, and then what does it look like going forward, the education and influence piece?
Yeah. So this is critical and crucial. I think it's absolutely important, and I think you need to look at it at two levels. The GABV, such as the Secretariat, so the organization that I run, is really more an organization that is facing the financial industry rather than maybe the broader public. Our members, though, who create or form the movement of the GABV, the larger movement of values-based banking, they are the ones that are reaching the wider public, that are able to influence public sentiment and also talk to their clients, for example, and explain to them how banking can be different and have more benefits for them if it's more values-based. So what we can do in the GABV by standing together is we have different initiatives. First of all, we run an annual campaign called the Banking on Values Day campaign, where we use social media together with our member banks to reach as many people as possible and let them know about the differences of values-based banks versus maybe more traditional banking and finance and what the benefits are. Secondly, we're building the empirical evidence in the GABV around the positive impact that we're creating. We've got a lot of anecdotal evidence. We've got great stories we can share with our members that they can use in their communications. But we also want to make sure we've got the empirical evidence. And for that purpose, we've established an academic network of researchers with which we collaborate and identify areas where we feel we need to better understand the theory of change of values-based banking and verify if that theory of change is actually working the way we think it's working. And if not, we need to adjust. So that's another initiative. And then you've alluded to this previously. We have different communities of practice, and one of the communities is the marketing and communications community of practice, which serves as a platform for exchange among the heads of marketing and where they can learn from each other what are successful approaches to sensitizing clients as well as the broader public. So we use that as well. And then you mentioned also, of course, educational programs that we offer, which are not for the broader public, but really more for the co-workers in the GABV. So, for example, there is the Leadership Academy, which is, I would call it a personal development program to understand how do you lead with and through values. And you also learn about the values of your organization, about your personal values and how they match and how you can use that in a leadership situation. We have the Governance Academy, which is a program really more directed at the non-executive directors to understand what the difference is of being a board member in a values-based institution. What does it mean, for example, for the recruitment of CEOs, for setting the strategy, for compensation schemes, etc. And then we also have a program which currently primarily the European banks use, but increasingly we also have international participation, which is called Summer School. This is provided by our partner, the Institute for Social Banking. It's a 1 week program for more junior co-workers. And that is a great way of getting to meet your colleagues from other member banks and learning about this great movement.
Oh my gosh. I didn't even know about that.
Well, there you go.
Thank goodness we had this this interview today. Um, One thing that was fascinating to me as my journey grew around the GABV, and I kind of joke about the I was asked to serve on the board, which I did for a couple of years, and I tell people it was a bucket list dream come true for something I didn't even know I had in my bucket. Um, because prior to 2009, the GABV didn't exist, and my second bank, First Green, we started in 2009 also, so we had the same year of birth. But where I was going with all that was it was interesting to me to see that banks around the world experience many of the same issues that we experience here in the U.S., whether it's regulatory, capital, raising deposits, it's all the same challenges. Um, But I wonder, and what have you heard from our member banks around the world? You said the values-based banks generally feel like they are better, stronger, more financially successful, not in spite of the values, but because of the values. And what we experience is customers that come to us just because of our values, they find us. We don't find them. And a huge amount of our staff found us, or we found them, and then they were just blown away by the values proposition that I've got to work there. I've got to have meaning in my life. Do the other, uh, pick a country that's more economically challenged. Bangladesh, do they experience the same thing? Do they experience coworkers that just want to join or?
Absolutely. I think it always is a little different there. I think in to take the case in point of Bangladesh, I don't know if you're aware, but in Bangladesh there was a revolution just last year, and the government was overthrown, and as a result, many of the banks in Bangladesh that were really primarily propped up by the previous government, they were on the brink of collapse. And so there was a flight to safety. So all the clients started bringing their deposits to our member BRAC Bank, which very quickly grew and is now the second largest bank in Bangladesh and might soon be even the largest bank in Bangladesh.
Jeez.
And I think also in that context, in that situation, a lot of the bankers in Bangladesh realized also, wow, maybe this is the right bank to work for. So I think that is a particular case which is maybe a bit special. But overall, um, I think the culture in a values-based bank typically is much more open, participatory. You feel you're probably more heard than maybe in another bank. And like you say, I think, I don't know if that was your experience, but I've often met bankers in this part of the world where I had the sense that they would have to, they had they shared our values, but they couldn't live those values in their job. They had to kind of hang them up at the coat rack and then do their job. And then in the evening, they would pick them up again and go home and live them. And that must be, in the longer term, I think, quite unsatisfactory. And so I do see this a lot. I hear this a lot. And both in emerging markets as well as in the more mature markets. I recently just met with the CEO, Damien Walsh, who you also know very well from Bank Australia. In his case, he mentioned to me, having this values-based proposition really creates such a differentiation in the market, and it really gives them a real market advantage as well. So I think you can see that market advantage both on the job market as well as in the market for clients.
Yeah, that's Damien is an interesting story because now his bank is one of the larger banks in Australia. And I would have never, I didn't know that about Brock Bank that they've now catapulted to that.
Yeah.
That is absolutely amazing. And um, it does give some sense of comfort too to know that in such an incredibly disruptive environment of overthrow of a government, they've thrived. Um, hopefully we never get there in America, but uh,
I think it's a typical story that we hear again and again around our movement, where our members have just defied all the odds and managed to survive, whereas maybe other banks have long stopped operating. I mean, we have a member bank, First Microfinance Bank in Afghanistan, and they were already at that time a systemic bank in Afghanistan, working with women, working with in the rural countryside, providing microfinance to entrepreneurs and keeping the economy going. And then when the Taliban took over, they were caught by surprise, like we all were, and they had to change their business model to Sharia compliant overnight. They managed to do it. And actually, they managed to do it also. I think I can say that with some pride, last but not least, because they turned to us and we were able to connect them with other Islamic finance institutions in our organization that knew how to do it. And again, they are still there. They're still working as far as they can, doing the right things again, in a very difficult context.
I forgot about that. Um, yeah, that is totally amazing. And the whole ability to overcome just incredible adversity and keep their chin up, and that's kind of the message that was conveyed every time we'd have a meeting with them or whatever. And it's like, oh my gosh, we do have such first world problems.
I wouldn't, I wouldn't belittle our problems in our parts of the world, whether it's in the US or let's say in Europe, for example. I think there are other challenges. And I think, again, what makes our member banks different is that they look, what are those societal or environmental challenges that are kind of that are falling through the cracks and that need to be addressed? And can we do something with our banking model? Is it an issue of finance, or are there other issues that need to be resolved? And what I find great about our movement, and I think that's an important message here in this conversation, it's not just about we are the good guys or it's just about our movement. In fact, the way I look at our movement today is that we've got the size and the credibility that we can start engaging far beyond our movement. And that's really what we need to do. We need to change mainstream finance. Just this morning, actually, my colleague in the secretariat had a great call with one of the largest banks in Malaysia to talk about what does the concept of values-based banking mean, and would it be feasible to maybe apply at least certain elements to a large mainstream bank?
Wow.
I think these are the opportunities that are out there for our movement at this point to really have an impact far beyond our membership. It's not just about our members. I think we're now mature enough, our scorecard is mature enough that we can engage with the mainstream industry in a way we were never able before, and where we can show how they can slowly change their business models to become more like us.
Wow. So that brings me to my last question. Um, Back when I was on the board, there was always a discussion of how big do we want to be, how many
Yeah.
members, what can our impact be? What is the current, business model or thought process um, on how big do we want to be?
Look, of course, we always are happy if our movement expands. With over 70 members in more than 40 countries, I feel like the proof point is there. We don't need to. It's great if there are more members trying to become more values-based, and we can work with them and help them along the way. And we will do that. In fact, right now we are evaluating, I think, 5 prospect banks, and I hope they will all be able to join by the end of this year. But the our ability to change finance doesn't depend on whether we are 70, 80, or 90 member banks. I think we have the credibility. While most of our members are in the larger picture, relatively small institutions, together we represent about 265 billion US dollars in total assets. So I think that's quite a sizable size. I think more importantly, we serve over 50 million clients. And if you look
Wow.
at their dependents, then we probably reach or touch the lives of about 200 million people. And all of these banks together, they represent the workforce of about 100,000 people. So I think we have, and these are all regulated deposit-taking financial institutions. So we do have the proof point that values-based banking can work, and it can work also on a large scale. We have very small banks. We have medium-sized banks that have maybe 50 billion US dollars in assets. So it works at different scales, and we can show that. And I think that's the most important message as we want to become really role models for the rest of the financial industry.
That's fantastic. Um, we are about at the point where we can do Q&A. Maria, are we there, or is there anything else we need to cover before we do that?
Yeah, if you want to cover a little bit about Climate First Bank hosting the upcoming North American chapter, we have also a few questions for the Q&A.
Oh, okay, that's a good point. So the GABV um, is divided into not it's not divided, that's a bad word, but there are chapters, and one of the chapters is the North American chapter, which I'm proud to say I was kind of in the middle of that formation of that chapter. And I think it prompted Peter back in the day. Peter Blom is who started the organization. Um, he was at the time CEO of Triodos, I think, Martin.
He was the longtime CEO of Triodos Bank, and in a way, he was the person who initiated this idea and brought together various leaders from really renowned values-based banks from around the world to start the GABV.
Yeah, and thank goodness he did. But so we are hosting the North American chapter meeting in St. Pete starting on November the 2nd, which I'm just super happy and super excited about, and um, can't wait to see you then, Martin, and everybody else that's going to be coming. Maria, if you want to just go ahead and if you have questions, listeners, just send them into the chat, and we'll try to hit as many of them as we can.
Yes. So we have one here from Corey Jones. It says, many students and young professionals want to align their careers with values-based banking, but don't know where to start. What practical steps or pathways will you recommend for young people who want to learn more about the Global Alliance for Banking and Values or even get involved with its work?
Well, Martin, I'll let you.
Yeah,
I just had
okay.
a
Well, I think
brainstorm on that, but
there's many opportunities. First of all, I think the great news is that most of our members are actually growing and growing quite quickly. So they continuously need new and motivated young co-workers that feel committed to their mission. So I think where I would start is really having a look on the GABB website. So that's gabb.org. And you can find which member banks are maybe close to you and are doing work. At the same time, what we're also starting to do on our side, we realized that values-based banking is missing in the curriculums of most universities and educational centers. And so we're putting together a case study book that academia can use to teach values-based banking. So we're doing that together with some of the academics in our academic research network that I mentioned. And that will allow some of those curriculums to, have a bit of an element of values-based banking and open that theme as well. So we're doing that. Then I can also recommend the massive open online course, which is provided by one of our partners, the Presencing Institute, which is affiliated with MIT. And that is called Just Money. And it's kind of gives you a sense of the different forms and shapes of values-based banking around the world and what it's all about. So that's also an interesting course you might want to look in, a MOOC provided by the Presencing Institute.
I would definitely highly recommend that. And Martin, I just had a brainstorm, especially since I just learned about summer school, and maybe we sidebar this is um, it would be really cool if a student could sign up for summer school and get sponsored by a member bank. Um,
That
you know,
is, that could be an option actually. In fact, the summer school typically does have also people from outside the network attend, and so there is a possibility of
okay,
a few outsiders as well come in and
that
learn about
that's
space.
very cool because Corey Jones, who asked the question, is an adjunct professor at the
Oh,
University of North Florida, so he has access to his students and all. Maria, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, we have a ton. It says, how does Climate First Bank balance profitability with their mission and rapid growth?
Um, well, we believe that we have to exceed all other banks in financial performance for people to take us seriously. And that could be largely a US thing. especially with entrepreneurial banking, us being the only country that really has entrepreneurial banking with thousands and thousands of bank charters. Um, and we have consistently done that in our last bank and in this bank. Um, so to us, it's not really a balance. It but it is a balance. We have to do both, and unless we do both, we're not worthy of the moniker of being a values-based bank, and we're not worthy enough to our shareholders. And I have a huge alliance or allegiance to our shareholders, many of whom are, family and they're all friends. They all became friends as when they became a shareholder. And our objective is to go public in September of next year, so a little over a year away. And hopefully we'll have, or not hopefully, we will have a lot more shareholders, but I'm just all about proving that you can do both.
That's amazing. We have another one that says, that's for Martin. Could you share any lessons learned from fellow member banks that you've successfully adopted within your own organizations?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, for sure.
I understood that lessons learned, but what kind of lessons learned?
From fellow members banks that you successfully adopted within your own organization.
Yeah, okay. So I think there's different examples. I think every new member in the GABV is kind of at a different stage on the journey towards values-based banking. And so we try to support them. And I just had to give maybe one example that I really enjoy talking about is our member in Papua New Guinea, TISA Bank. They were a mutual, and they wanted to become a bank because in Papua New Guinea, only about 1/3 of the population has access to finance, to formal finance. And so they realized if they really wanted to make a difference, they had to change their business model and get a full bank license so they could, just do other things that they were not able to do as a mutual. But their big concern was how do you stay true to your values that they had eventually adopted as a mutual bank with the collective ownership. And so they were looking for a solution, and they found the GABV as a way of really finding a framework that is universal, that they could adopt, even though they were becoming a commercial bank, and still stay the course and stay values-based. So I think that is a very nice example of why a bank was actually looking to interact with the GABV. Another example is from the United States. We had a relatively small credit union called the Federal Credit Union called Civic, based in North Carolina, and they were in they really went full on in. They were actually controlled by a larger federal credit union, but they completely adopted the GABV principles and values and really designed their whole business model around those values. And just recently, they did a retro merger with their parent credit union. And now you have this big credit union that is fully aligned with the GABV principles, that has a business model that has been designed around these principles and the approach and the framework that we offer to them. So I think these are two very telling examples how banks can really benefit from learning from others. It's not just that we provide a template or anything like that, but it's really more about having an exchange at the level of our boards, of leaderships between the members, and they can learn from each other how to design the strategy in the organization to become really values-based.
That was a really cool example, Martin. And then I also thought of the Vermont Federal Employees Credit, is that what Vermont State Employees
State
Credit Union?
Employee Credit Union, which
Um,
now is East Rise. East Rise
yes,
Credit Union, which also had a very similar journey as well. That's true.
big merger, but the whole thing is now a values based and a member, and the leadership is so on board. It's really cool to see. And for us at Climate First, a big advantage to especially the regional meetings is sharing best practices with North American financial institutions because we are so similar anyway. Um,
I,
Maria, do you have another question?
yeah, I think we have time for one last question that is actually related with that last part you said. And I'm really excited for this one because they're asking what are some topics that are being discussed when Climate First Bank hosts the Global Alliance for Baking Our Values?
You have the agenda, Maria.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Um,
I'm excited because we are discussing organic food and how is that healthy for us. We have a few secret invites, but I would like to say that we're also hosting a public opportunity for Carlton Ward that I'm going to be happy to send to all the people attending um, this webinar. So you're all invited to hear more about Carlton Ward and the path of the planner. So I think that was more of a me question. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, it's okay. So yes, to extend the invite to every listener, we will have a public event. Carlton Ward is a National Geographic explorer and photographer, and he did um, the film The Path of the Panther, and it is absolutely fascinating. His presentation's fascinating and it's free to the public. So sign up as soon as you can because it's somewhat limited seating. We'll have space for a couple hundred, but not more than that. And then another thing that we do, and I think it's every meeting, Martin, if I'm not mistaken, we do learning journeys where we go out to an organization or a business that one of the member banks, and then do a tour and listen to how they run their business, and we've got a couple of really cool values-based businesses that we're going to be visiting.
I mean, from the North American chapter and also at the GAB, we were extremely excited to come to St. Petersburg, and I think you guys have really put together a fantastic program that's super inspiring. These kind of meetings are there to re-energize the CEOs and give them kind of some fresh air and another perspective on their work. And they're also they usually carry the signature of the host bank, and in this case, Climate First. So obviously, climate will be really the centerpiece of this meeting. But I'm really excited about the fantastic speakers you've lined up. And at the end, it's always just great to get into the room with all the other CEOs and have these kind of exchanges because every time you learn something and you take home some golden nuggets, you can of inspiration. So really looking forward to it, Ken.
Yeah, we've got some great speakers. We've got Bill McKibben, we've got Hugh Kent, who's an organic blueberry farmer and um, uh, and instrumental in the movement, the Real Organic Project, and Paul Moynester, who we mentioned earlier. He will be on a panel or speaker. So um, yes, we're really looking forward to it. Maria, do we have any others? We have 2 minutes. We could probably handle
Okay.
another one.
Yeah, for sure. Let me see. Okay, what opportunities and challenges do you see for values-based bank over the next 5 years as global financial system face political shifts, regulatory changes, and economic uncertainty?
Wow. I have opinions on that, but I'll let Martin start.
I have opinions too. In fact, we were just talking about what the theme is going to be for the next annual meeting in the
Mm.
Dominican Republic in Santo Domingo in 2026. And it's exactly that. It's how do we stay the course in times of shifting paradigms at different levels, not just economic, environmental, but also social and political. What is our role, and how can we, more importantly, also support our clients stay the course, because they will be feeling these shifts and these changes that are happening. It's to some degree also a redistribution of economic power, of political power, etc. And we're all going to be affected. So I think that's going to certainly be top of mind of our CEOs as we meet the next time in the global format. But Ken, maybe you have some thoughts from a US perspective.
Well, yeah, and maybe it is somewhat of a global perspective given what's going on around the world, but we're being inundated with, um, in my opinion, crazy laws like the Florida House Bill 3, the anti-ESG bill, and all the stuff that's happening at the federal level. And we just we're just going to double down on our resolve to do the right thing. We're going to do the right thing every day, day in and day out, and the right thing can't be disputed. It's not wrong by definition. So somebody can try to call it wrong, but um, when you're standing before whatever your belief system is, standing before God, you know that you've done the right thing. You know that you can sleep at night. So I guess that's my answer.
Yeah.
Perfect. I
Maria,
think,
anything else?
no, I think we can wrap this up. I think it's been such a beneficial conversation for all of us, learning a lot about GABB. And this is not going to be the last time hosting GABB, because we are really aligned and very happy to be part of it. So I'll let you guys wrap it up. Thank you so much, Martin, again, for your knowledge and your time. Really, really appreciate that.
Thank you, Maria. And I just want to put one plug in for the GABV. If you're listening from another state, you don't want to bank with Climate First Bank, look up GABV, look at the members, and find a member bank and bank with them.
Great.
And
Thanks, Ken. And also from my side, thanks a lot. We're just delighted to have Climate First Bank. In fact, sometimes I suspect, Ken, that you just created Climate First Bank to get back into the GABV
I
because you
should have
love it
said
so
that.
much.
I should have said that at the start. Dadgummit, that's exactly why I did it. That and to have an IT guy so that when my computer craps out, I got somebody to fix it. But Martin, thank you for
Great.
everything you do and the great.
And thanks to our listeners. It's been great having this opportunity to interact with you.
Thank you,
Bye bye.
everybody. See you next time. Bye.
All right. Bye bye.